Kindness feels right. It feels moral. It feels human. And that is exactly why it fails. Most people are raised to believe kindness is strength, that fairness creates loyalty, that patience earns respect, that if you do the right thing long enough, the world will eventually respond in kind. This belief is comforting. It allows people to see themselves as good. It allows them to believe they are safe. But comfort is not truth, and safety is not guaranteed by intention. Reality does not reward kindness by default. It tests it. And when kindness has no structure, no boundary, no consequence, it does not inspire gratitude. It invites pressure. This video is not about cruelty. It is not about becoming harsh, aggressive, or heartless. It is about understanding why kindness collapses under stress, why it fails under competition, why it breaks when power is involved. Because if you rely on goodwill in an unstable world, you do not create harmony, you create exposure. And exposure always attracts force. Modern culture promotes a comforting lie. It says, be understanding, be patient, be empathetic, give people the benefit of the doubt, absorb discomfort, avoid conflict, trust intentions. And it promises that if you do these things consistently, balance will emerge. But balance does not emerge from softness, it emerges from structure. When rules are unclear, people do not feel safe, they feel uncertain. Uncertainty does not produce gratitude, it produces anxiety. And anxiety does not create cooperation, it creates opportunism. This is not cynicism, it is observation. Look closely at workplaces. The most agreeable employee is rarely the most respected. They are the most interrupted, the most overworked, the most relied upon without recognition. Not because they lack skill, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack consequence. Look at friend groups. The person who always forgives, always adjusts, always compromises, eventually becomes invisible. Their presence is expected, not valued. Their absence is noticed only when convenience is lost. Look at families. The parent who enforces nothing becomes resented. The sibling who absorbs everything becomes dismissed. This pattern repeats everywhere humans interact, because human behavior does not respond to intention, it responds to structure. Long before modern psychology attempted to soften this truth, ancient thinkers were brutally honest about it. They did not ask how humans should behave. They observed how humans actually behave. And one thinker in particular refused to romanticize human nature. Feizi did not believe people were naturally good. He believed people were naturally responsive. Responsive to reward, responsive to punishment, responsive to certainty. Not to morality, not to virtue, not to kindness. To Feizi, kindness was not a virtue, it was a signal that rules could bend, that consequences were negotiable, that pressure would be tolerated. And once people sense that tolerance, they apply force, not because they are evil, but because they are human.
Kindness without structure creates a psychological condition known as boundary erosion. It does not happen suddenly, it happens gradually. Someone asks for a small exception, you allow it. Then another request comes, you justify it. Then a third, you rationalize it. At no point do you feel exploited, you feel reasonable. But the boundary is no longer where you think it is, it has moved. And when boundaries move unpredictably, people stop respecting them. They do not consciously decide to disrespect you, they simply adapt. This is not manipulation, it is conditioning. Feizi observed this pattern in rulers, officials, and advisors. Lenient leaders were not overthrown by enemies, they were hollowed out by insiders. People close enough to test limits without risk. People who understood that mercy created space. Kindness made leaders predictable. Predictability made them manageable. And control never stays with the kind. Modern psychology confirms this quietly. People do not feel secure when rules are flexible. They feel secure when rules are consistent. Children raised with unclear discipline do not become freer, they become anxious. Teams without enforcement do not become collaborative, they become resentful. Organizations without consequence do not become humane, they decay internally. Because kindness without structure does not feel loving, it feels unstable. Fear of consequence stabilizes behavior more reliably than hope of reward. Not fear as cruelty, fear as certainty. When outcomes are predictable, people stop testing. When lines are clear, conflict decreases. This is not because people become better, it is because ambiguity disappears. The most dangerous form of kindness is selective mercy, when rules apply sometimes but not always, when exceptions are emotional, when enforcement depends on mood, closeness, or sympathy. This does not create compassion, it creates resentment. People do not ask whether something is fair, they ask why it was allowed for someone else. Favoritism destroys authority faster than cruelty, because cruelty is impersonal, favoritism is personal. Once authority becomes personal, it becomes fragile. People stop respecting the system, they start negotiating the person, and negotiation never favors stability. Morality functions in stable environments. Power rarely exists in one. Under pressure, people protect themselves. Alliances shift. Ethics bend. When survival is threatened, people do not ask what is right, they ask what works. This is not pessimism, it is pattern recognition. And this is why systems outlast personalities. A system does not get tired, it does not feel guilt, it does not hesitate. It enforces consequences consistently. Feizi understood this deeply. He believed that the role of leadership was not to be loved, it was to remove uncertainty, because uncertainty creates chaos, and chaos invites collapse. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. The world does not collapse because of cruelty, it collapses because of unclear consequences. You do not need to be harsh, you do not need to be cold, but you cannot be ambiguous. Ambiguity is interpreted as weakness. Weakness invites pressure. Pressure demands response. Feizi's lesson was never be cruel. It was simple, remove uncertainty. Because when people know exactly what happens if they cross a line, they stop crossing it. Only then can kindness exist without being exploited. Kindness without structure is not virtue, it is exposure. And the more power you hold, the more costly that exposure becomes. Power magnifies consequences. Every inconsistency becomes visible. Every exception becomes precedent. People do not remember intentions, they remember outcomes, and outcomes shape behavior. Many people resist this idea because they confuse kindness with goodness. But goodness does not require softness, it requires clarity. A boundary enforced calmly is not cruelty, it is stability. A rule applied consistently is not oppression, it is predictability. Predictability reduces fear. Fear reduction increases cooperation. This is the paradox most people miss. Fear of consequence reduces fear of chaos.
When systems are weak, individuals are forced to compensate. They negotiate, they manipulate, they test. When systems are strong, individuals relax. They stop guessing, they stop probing. This is why strict environments often feel calmer than permissive ones, because clarity removes anxiety. Feizi did not seek to control people emotionally. He sought to eliminate uncertainty structurally. He understood that emotional governance collapses under scale. You cannot manage millions with empathy. You manage them with systems. This lesson applies beyond rulers and states. It applies to leadership, to relationships, to personal boundaries. When you are endlessly forgiving, people do not feel grateful, they feel unclear. When you explain every boundary, people feel invited to negotiate. When you enforce nothing, people assume nothing matters. This is not because they disrespect you, it is because you trained them. Power is not loud, it is consistent. Authority is not emotional, it is predictable. Respect is not demanded, it emerges from certainty. The world responds not to how you feel, but to what happens when lines are crossed. Most people want to be liked, very few want to be clear. But clarity outperforms likability under pressure. When collapse is possible, softness becomes liability. This is not an argument against compassion, it is an argument against ambiguity. In the next part, we will go deeper. We will examine why fear outperforms trust at scale, why obedience forms without force, and how invisible systems shape behavior even when no one is watching. Because the most powerful control is not visible, it is structural. And once you understand this, you stop trying to be liked. You start trying to be clear.